Greetings, artists. Today we will continue our study of color within the elements of art by working on watercolor techniques. Take out your paper from last time, flip it over, and on the back you're going to write watercolor techniques. If you started your color charts on the front, made a mistake and then flipped it to the back, so there's writing on the back now, erase it. You're going to use the back of that paper. This time you will need to create 2" by 2" squares. You need to use a ruler, otherwise they won't be 2" by 2". You will need 10 2" by 2" squares. Make sure that you leave space in between your 2" by 2" squares so that when your watercolor paper is wet, the colors won't bleed into each other. You will need to label each square with a different technique. Flat wash, uncontrolled wash, graded wash, softening, lifting, wet into wet, blotting, dry brush, spatter, salt. We'll begin with a flat wash. You will apply water and pigment to your brush, and then you will make an even wash in the 2" by 2" square. You should have a smooth square of color. Remember to clean your brush on the paper towel. In the next square, you will create an uncontrolled wash. This one does not have to be flat or even. It needs to just cover the area. So if your strokes are haphazard, that's okay. You just want color all over the area. This is a great way to make texture. Your next wash will be a graded wash. Similar to what we did on the other side of the paper for our color swatches, you'll start out with your darkest band of color at the top of your square, and then using water, you'll pull that color down to the bottom. Remember to clean your brush in between strokes. So with the graded wash, use water to drag the color down. In the softening box, you will add color to one side of the box. It doesn't matter whether you choose right or left. Just apply color to half of the box. Let that dry a little bit and we'll come back to it. In the lifting box, you'll apply a wash to the entirety of the square. Once you have done so, we're going to let that dry and go back to the softening box. Using only water, you will soften the edge of your color swatch. With a clean dry brush, you will pick up pigment from the paper, known as lifting. When you lift colors, you're removing an area of pigment to lighten the area. Lifting can also be done with a paper towel. For wet into wet, you will first wet the area with clean water. Next, you'll put pigment on your brush, making sure that your brush is wet. And then you'll drop pigment onto the wet area. You may use one or more colors, it's up to you. I use an orange and a yellow, but you may use any colors in your palette to try out this technique. Just make sure that you've wet the paper first, and then you wet your brush, pick up pigment, and drop it into the wet area. For the blotting square, we will add a wash to the paper. Once you have done so, you'll use your towel to remove color. Be sure to turn your paper towel so that you're not redepositing color. So if you dab on one side, dab to the other side so that you can continue to pick up color. For dry brush, you will use a clean brush, remove the water with your paper towel, and dip that brush into the pigment. You will then apply the pigment to the paper. It should have a textured appearance. If you end up with a wash, your brush is too wet. When doing the spatter technique, you want to make sure to gently tap on your finger. You shouldn't have paint flying across the room or across to your neighbor. This is something you want to do carefully so as not to ruin your clothes or your neighbor's clothes. Again, a very gentle tapping against your finger will suffice. For our last box, we will apply a wash, and then you will sprinkle salt onto the still wet wash. Make sure that you have adequately wet your paper, otherwise the salt won't stick. Let that dry, and once it's dry, you'll dust off the salt crystals into the trash can. Notice that my water is clear. Yours should also be clean. Remember, we're cleaning our bristles on the paper towel so as to minimize the time spent going to and fro. If you have any questions about the techniques we are using, please ask. I'll be moving about the room answering questions and assisting with measurements. Thank you. I look forward to seeing what you create.